yearns and thirsts for, regardless of whether it inclines towards spirituality, intellectuality, academia, or other such matters, so that he engages him from this standpoint in order to ensure he receives that which is ultimately desired. And those three examples are merely examples. The point here being is that people are different. And so the key to this stage and being effective in it is that we start to understand people. We start to understand the backgrounds of people. We start to understand the inclinations of people. And that after having established relationships with them, based upon what we know their God-given gifts are and their inclinations are, then that we can help them come to know what it is that they need to know and elucidate for them the path. And so people are different, naturally. Some people incline towards spirituality. Some people incline towards academia. Other people incline towards nature. Some people are people's people. Other people are more introverts. That some people incline towards humanitarian service. Other people that want to remain in the books. Some people are ideas people. Other people are events people. People of our different nature. And so we have to understand and appreciate the diversity of various people and engage them in a way that helps match their God-given abilities and their inclinations towards some type of good that exists within the vast teachings of our Prophet ﷺ. And this is the essence of this stage. And so he then goes on to say, this stage divides into two distinct areas: to correct erroneous inclinations and understandings, and to teach what the person is ignorant of, or to remind them of what they already know. So this stage has these two different breakdowns. Okay, all people will need to rectify ways that they think. No one thinks about everything correctly. That not everyone has, not every person, that not one person has that every inclination fully correct. Is that all people have certain inclinations that need correcting, that need rectifying. And so that these inclinations and understandings, this is very important. In Arabic, it's that your mafahim and your muyul, your mail and your muyul, which is what you incline towards. We all have things that we incline towards. And some of those things are good. And some of those things could be used for good, but we don't use them for good. And then some of those inclinations are inappropriate and better left. So what are our inclinations? How to understand them, and how to correct and modify, or at least give a religious context to some of the inclinations that we have that relate to permissible things. And then also our understandings. We are not ma'soom and divinely protected in relation to our understanding. No matter how good of an understanding of the deen that we have, it can always be better. We always need to hone our understandings. And there will be understandings that we have that are incorrect, that we need to rectify and we need to correct. So this stage, it relates to that, but it also relates to that learning that which we don't know. We need to be taught that which we don't know. Or we need to be reminded of something that we already know. And there are a lot of things that we've learned that lie dormant within us, but it's as if we've forgotten them, because when we don't put them into practice, even though we know them, that there's this disconnect between what we know and what we do. So we need to be reminded so that it can become a reality. And this is why teaching is also so important. Because when you're in the position of teaching, there'll be things that you then teach that you might not be putting into practice fully, or you're only partially putting them into practice, or you're not putting them into practice at all. And by teaching them, it reminds you, wow, I need to put that into practice. So what are the wasa'il, the means, the mechanisms of this particular stage, if we're going to speak about it in a very practical sense? The first is choosing the most appropriate time and ensuring that the recipient is ready to accept whatever is imparted. So if someone's down if someone's not having a good day, if someone's going through a difficult time in their life, that is not the time to put some heavy responsibility on them. That's a time where we need to stand by their side, where we need to help them bear that tribulation. And we might postpone something that we want to say to them to a later time. For example, and there's many other situations that could potentially happen. But the point here is that we choose the right time. And what is the most important thing for us to do in that particular time when we want to impart some type of good to them. But also it relates to place. There are places that are more appropriate for some things than others. And one example is that if you're at a wedding, for instance, that quoting verses of the Quran about death, or quotes about death at a wedding, for instance, even though that we're generally speaking about individual da'wah and the individual call, but just to throw an example out there, that's not the time that you really speak about. Death is at a wedding. It's a time where you show happiness. It's a time where that you speak about relationships. It's a time where you remain optimistic and talk about the importance of the situation and so forth. Okay, and likewise, if that someone is in a particular place where people are out and they're at a gathering together, and it's a gathering where everyone is relaxed. And so to impose something of difficulty on them when they're in a relaxed state might not be the best idea. So choosing not only the right time, but the right place, and then the right hal. Number 3, which is to choose the most appropriate conditions. How you do something, the way you do something. And you would be surprised how taking this into consideration changes the way people receive what it is that you're going to tell them. And I remember one of my teachers telling me that there was a mistake that he was making in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. And he was adding an extra letter. And the person who realized that was embarrassed to advise the man. But he realized he had to because it was a mistake in the Quran. So what he did was he came to him and he asked him about these 2 verses. And he knew the answer, but he wanted that person to realize the answer. And asked him, is there 2 wows or just wow in one of the verses? And it made that person review and realize then that he was saying the wow twice when it only should have been said once. And then he eventually realized that it was his way of getting him to know that mistake that he was making. Very indirect. And other people might not even have known that that's actually what he was trying to achieve, was that person to realize his mistake. I mean, what a beautiful way. And the famous story that we hear of the man who was performing his wudu incorrectly in Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein, performing it properly near him so that man could learn proper wudu. This is one of the best ways that we can teach, by showing by example and indirectly that getting across what it is that we need to get across. And also effective use of indirect methods, which we just pointed to, when elucidating, and that can be clearly seen in the life and times of the great caller who was our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he mentions 3 different examples that branch from this, such as endeavoring to incite informed opinions that exist in the soul of the recipient. Okay, in other words, is that this person might already know what the right answer is, but speaking in a way, asking in a certain way, doing certain things, so what this person already knows, what's inside of them, is that bringing it to the surface. And the more that we can learn to do this, the more effective we'll be in our relationships. Because in the end, like as we mentioned, there's this big barrier between that us and the benefit of people, and that is the nafs. And the nafs is there. The nafs is there. Do not think that you can bypass it easily. We have to do these things because it is what is right. And another example is to subtly entice the recipient to ask about a certain topic. So to talk about things in a way that allow this person to start a conversation about something that they need to talk about, and to bring it up indirectly so that you can eventually get to what needs to be said. And then also to engage him with a preformed question or line of inquiry. This is a way, an indirect way that allow people to know certain things that they need to know. And then he says in number 5 is that preparing the listener to listen attentively by employing any means that grab attention. Okay, and so that we know that people by their nature become bored. They get used to things. And so it is important for us to use various wasa'il in means that, as it says here, shaddad intibah, that make people pay attention. And some examples of that, and these are asalib, these are methods that we can use solely for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. Examples being that mentioning unusual events. People naturally like to hear about things that are unusual, and it draws them. When someone has vast knowledge and that quotes certain things in certain ways and makes sense of them, things that they might have heard before or forgotten, but that uses them as a proof to prove a particular point or something of that nature, is that will cause people to listen carefully. And that to a certain degree, that's all we do and all we speak about, but using that is that good technique. And then uqa al-ahwal, that various things that are happening, real stories, that current events. It's important for the person who's involved in this work to be aware of what is happening in the world and to connect the knowledge that they're imparting and the teachings that they're imparting to that events of the real world. Or moving stories. There's nothing better than stories. Real stories of real people that you know that you have come into contact with. And they might be your teachers, and they might be people that you know in the community, or they might be people that you've come to hear about. And then your manner of speech, the way that you speak, and your intonations, and when you mention what you mention, and so forth. And that the medium, the language that you're speaking in, that developing a mastery of it, and so forth. These things are all that important. And then to show him powerful images. In our day and age is that there are so many negative images out there, along with that are attempts to bring good into that a world, oftentimes the online world, that there's so much negativity in, is that to flood it with good and good images of the righteous, of righteous places, and so forth and so on, is one of the ways of doing this. And then number 6, avoiding excessive and prolonged elucidation. Rather, it should be done in stages. So knowing how to do what's called tadarruj, little by little, taking people from one stage to the next, from one way station to the next. That if we are not patient, we try to do everything at once, people can't take it all on at once. They will become overwhelmed. So learning that how to give little by little, to move people from one stage to the next. And then he says to give him a book or a tape on the topic that you want to get across to him, or on the erroneous information that he believes which you want to correct. And so this is important, is that we share lectures with people, that we share materials with people, that we might want to keep copies of important books and gift them to people, that lectures, online lectures and so forth. This was written at a time where still tapes were that popular, but whether it be a CD or whether it be sharing it online or through social media or anything of that nature, that sharing things of benefit with people. And one of my close friends who does this so well is Sayyidi Shaykh Faraz Rabbani. It's hardly a time where you go see him except he's going to give you some type of gift. and he's constantly buying books not only for himself but to share with others and spreading benefit. And this is a great thing to do. And then inviting him to attend a gathering or knowledge of or remembrance that suits him. And again, التي تناسبه, that suits him. There might be different types of gatherings, and there might be certain people that aren't ready for certain types of gatherings, or they're wary of certain types of gatherings. And so it's an indication that we should have various types of gatherings, and different people will fit into different types of gatherings. The type of people that will be comfortable at, for instance, a barbecue might not be the type of people that are comfortable at that some type of dhikr gathering of remembrance. The person that will attend that gathering of a general nature in terms of learning is not like someone who's going to attend a class that caters to students of knowledge. And so it's important that we have an array of different gatherings in our locale that we actively take part in, that we can bring different people to according to where they're at, and that according to that what they will benefit from. To introduce him to scholars or students of knowledge, this is a good thing to do, that connecting them to other people. And this is why relationships are so important. Relationships are so important, is that we need to establish relationships. And whenever we have events and programs, it's very important that we get to know people that we don't already know. We ask about them, we learn about them, and when you take that extra step to do that, and you sit with people at lunchtime and dinner time that you're not necessarily that comfortable with because you don't know much about them, and learn about them, you will find is that the next time that you see them, that there's mawaddah and there's love for them. And then you develop even a stronger bond, and then the next time you see them, that there's even more love. And the more that we know about people and their backgrounds, the more empathy and mercy that we can have for them, but simultaneously is that the closer that we become in general. And then to avoid making him feel that you're trying to make him ascribe to a specific school of thought. This is so important. That he says here, the word here mentioned is intima li manhaj mu'ayyan, to a specific way. Whether that be a specific way in relation to law, whether that be a specific way in relation to spirituality, is that we have to respect the valid differences of the ummah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that our call is to Allah and His Messenger. We do not call to our teachers. We do not call to our specific school of thought. We do not call to our specific way. To repeat, the call is to Allah and His Messenger. We want everyone to come to know Allah and His Messenger and to be beloved by Allah and His Messenger. And it's perfectly valid to do everything that you can do from what you have learned from your teachers and the methodology that they have imparted to you. However, the call is to Allah and His Messenger. Even though your particular way might be a way for them to achieve closeness, but there's many other ways as well. And we have to recognize that. And we have to recognize that diversity is our strength, and there is that incredible wisdom in it. Because our deen is a universal deen that is for all people in all times, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until the end of time. So this point is extremely important. We do not call to our school of thought, to our teachers, to our own methodology. We call to Allah and His Messenger through what we've been taught. And if we come across a person and we really think that it's better for them to spend time with other teachers, we are not sincere with our Lord if we try to claim them for ourselves. That is a very serious thing to do, is that we should let people go where it is best for them. But that requires purity of soul. And so to avoid making him feel that you are trying to make him ascribe to a specific school of thought. There are times where people pressure people to take on a certain teacher or to do something specifically, that we want to avoid that. And avoiding direct criticism of any faults that he has. So it doesn't mean that you don't help someone learn, but to the extent possible, we should avoid direct criticism. And if you've ever been around teachers that are merciful, and you think back, wow, what did I do in that situation? Oh my. And in that situation, look what I did. But you found that your teachers, they were patient with you. They didn't publicly expose you. And most of the time, they overlooked the mistake that you made so that you could learn in the long term and not do it again. And then you grow and you move on and you leave that particular mistake, and then you think back like, oh my, they didn't say anything when I did such and such. And the mercy and patience that they show. Because just as you have children who make a lot of mistakes, and to a certain degree it's expected that they're going to make mistakes. Likewise, in the spiritual path, you have people that are babies, you have people that are young children, you have people that are youth, and you have people that are young adults, and then you have people that are mature, and so forth and so on. You have that in the spiritual path. And so just as the way you would interact with your child when they're young, when they make their mistakes and so forth, and sometimes you overlook certain things and you choose that what to make an issue of and what not to make an issue of. Likewise, in the spiritual path, this is the state. This is the way of doing it. And then finally, mentioning the preeminence and nobility of knowledge and giving breadth to the meaning of seeking sacred knowledge, alongside clarifying the difference between real and superficial knowledge. Very important point is that there needs to be a call to encourage people to learn the sacred law, to learn the deen. This is the source of all good. There is nothing we can do as a community moving forward if we don't have learned people. There is no unique contribution that we can make that will be of any benefit without immersing ourselves in the prophetic inheritance. This is the reality. The prophetic inheritance will color your heart and limbs in a way that positions you to make a unique contribution that will be of benefit. It's as simple as that. And for people that think that learning, and this, I have a friend of mine who told me who wanted to go learn, and when he wanted to take his family overseas to learn, someone actually said to him, "You want to go overseas to study? That's something from the 90s, brother. Since when is seeking sacred knowledge a trend or fad of the 90s? Miskeen." Sacred knowledge was important from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and with all of the Prophets ﷺ, and in every year and decade and generation and century after the Prophet ﷺ until now. And it will never change until the Day of Judgment. And unfortunately, we were talking about this earlier with someone, there is this gap between some people where you have to take these extra steps to even convince them about the importance or the efficacy of learning sacred knowledge. There's this gap. They don't understand it. They don't see how learning fiqh, learning aqidah, learning hadith, learning tajweed will help them in their career, will help them in their everyday life. And that disconnect is so, I don't even know what to say, that it's just so unbelievable that people don't see that. Nevertheless, that's where people are at, many people. And that the academic world, the same things exist, because a lot of the humanities departments aren't receiving as much funding as they did previously. And so they've started to talk about these things called transferable skills. I remember first going to England and in a large classroom in Cambridge, that being taught about these transferable skills whereby the humanities departments can be justified, because yes, even in humanities departments, if you're studying history or something of that nature, there's something that will help benefit your career. I mean, the fact that we even have to go there nowadays tells us about our state. The fact that you even have to sit and convince someone of the importance of sacred knowledge indicates the level where we're at. This should be intuitive to us. This should be in that flesh, bone, and blood. And if that's people's state, is that we have to go out of our way to help them realize its importance. And the type of work that we're doing here, that people that are doing similar work to what we're doing, there has to be a change in mindset for people to appreciate this type of work. And we don't want to lose hope, even though that the situation is grim at times, is that we want to work hard and lay down the foundations, and inshallah there will be an awakening where people will start to realize is that this is the key to all good. This is the source of all success. And most importantly, not just in a worldly sense, which is a given. That's one of the fruits that comes from learning, especially sacred knowledge. But most important, your relationship with your Lord. How can you have a relationship with Allah if you don't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing? If you don't even know what the straight path is, if you're ignorant of the sunnah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how can you live the whole purpose of life, which is to attain ma'rifah? This is what it's all about. And La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Allah Ta'ala yuhawil hal and ahad muslimin ahsan al hal. May Allah change our state and the state of the believers to the best of all states. So that we need to inculcate in people a deep appreciation and realization of the importance of knowledge. And likewise, that we need to explain the difference between real and superficial knowledge, between beneficial and potentially harmful knowledge. This is key. The most important knowledge that we can learn is the knowledge that's going to help us arrive to the afterlife safely. And that begins with a study of the individual obligations of this religion, increasing in our formal studies, but then also learning the sciences of the heart, regularly being exposed to the meanings of revelation through understanding the Quran, the hadith of our Prophet, the life of our Prophet ﷺ, and the science of the heart, tasawwuf, so that we can become transformed and we can tread a path to draw near to our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what he states for the stage, and then he summarizes it by saying the foundation of this stage is the statement of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, khatibun nasa ala qadri ukulihim. Speak to people in accordance to their intelligence. Meaning you're going to speak to people differently based upon who they are and what they know and their background and all of these other things that were mentioned. And that speaking to them in a way that can help facilitate their learning, and then that they can come to know what it is that they are required to know. And the statement of our Master Ali, God ennoble his countenance, speak to people within their own frames of reference. حَدِّثُ النَّاسَ بِمَا يَعْرِفُونَ. Would you like for God and His Messenger to be denied? This is the danger if you're speaking to a person in a way that he can't understand, that you might even push them away. And we all know that when there's a language barrier, how frustrating it is. If that there's people that don't speak in the way that you understand, or vice versa, you're in a place where people, you don't know how to speak that so that they can understand. It gets frustrating. And that there's misunderstandings, and then people get very upset and so forth, and because there's a lack of communication. Likewise, in terms of, even if we speak the same language, but the way that we connect at the intellectual level. And then we have stage 3. And stage 3 is the stage of taklif. And that we said kulfa is a difficulty. And taklif literally is to impose a difficulty, but really taklif is about responsibility. And so after someone's heart has been warmed, and that there's a connection been established, and they go through a long drawn out process of learning and having elucidated to them the rights of Allah and His Messenger and of people, and they transform themselves as a result, because they're living what it is that they know, they're putting into practice that which they have spent time learning. Eventually, at this stage now, that they will have to develop responsibility and feel the heaviness of that responsibility on their shoulders, so that just as at one time they were brought in and helped, that they can now go out and do the same. So he says, this is the ultimate objective which the caller desires to reach with those whom he calls, is that they be in and of themselves people that are living those teachings but conveying those teachings. These are people that now not only that these people are now people in service to humanity, just as the person who taught them was also in service. He says, it is tantamount to the nurtured development of upright callers unto God who serve this nation with the attribute of sincerity, veracity, mutual fraternity for the sake of God, and assistance of one another in order to render the religion of God victorious. And that this is the description of this type of person. And we don't just want 1, 2, or 3 people like this. Ideally, we want every person in our community like this. Every person in our community. That as long as there's one person missing, that there's going to be something that slips through the cracks as a result. The reality is, not everyone's going to do it. But we have to try and strive to affect as many people as possible. And all we can do is do our best. All we can do is make the call. All we can do is put in the energy and to do the outward. The remaining part is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do what it is that we're supposed to do, and the effects of that are up to Allah ta'ala. Some people will be affected, some people will respond, some people will hate you, some people will show enmity towards you, some people will try to hurt you and harm you. And you're doing everything that you can possibly do to help them. It's amazing. But this is why it's the work of the prophets. How many prophets do we know were persecuted, and they were exiled, and they were attacked, and on and on and on and on and on, including our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this is the nature of this work. And if we freak out at every prick, how are you going to really become from the people of Allah? How are you really going to purify yourself? Is at the slightest prick, you show that you don't have that integrity to remain firm, or the fortitude and perseverance to remain firm upon these teachings in light of this. So these people that are in a state of khidmah, service, right, with sincerity, with truthfulness, with that establishing a brotherhood amongst each other, and that working together to support one another to give victory to the deen of Allah. And it's not enough for there to be one person. We need groups of people. We need groups of people. And it doesn't mean that we have groups that are at the expense of preserving relationships with the ummah of our Prophet ﷺ. On the contrary, is that while we have certain people that we naturally incline towards that we work with, likewise we give everyone else their right as well. So what is the asl, what is the foundation or basic principle of this stage? It is to relate to this stage, that relates to this, is for the caller to be convinced and to feel the pressing need of the community for as many transformative callers as possible, and that the potential for that is within everyone's capacity. Everyone you have come into contact with, no matter how bad their state is, that when you meet them, there is a possibility that go through these 3 stages and end up helping other people. And you would be surprised when people hit rock bottom, you think that they're finished. You'd be surprised about the resilience of people. And if Allah Ta'ala wants good for someone, what He will cause to happen to that individual, and what will allow that individual and make that individual transform and inspire him to then dedicate his life to serving other people. And so that this is the basic principle, this is the way that we need to be thinking. Everyone we come into contact with that can be in service of humanity, and in particular the ummah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what we're required to do is to help activate the individual capacity and potential that exists within individuals. And we want to do so selflessly. We want to do so desiring nothing, not even for them to say to us, Jazakallah khair. We don't even desire them to say thank you. Sayyidah Aisha, whenever she would send charity to someone, she would send one of her servants to listen to the dua that the person said. And then when he would inform her what the person said, she would make the same dua for that person. A dua for a dua, she wants her reward from Allah. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. Allah says, indeed that we only feed you for the noble countenance of God. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We want no recompense for you or even thanks. We don't want recompense for anyone, from anyone for anything. And one of the things I've noticed that my teachers are very uncomfortable with is that while they teach or after they teach someone to come give them gifts. They don't like that. They want their reward to be solely for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. And one of the most beautiful things that I know about them, I don't know them to ever have accepted, let alone asked, for an honorarium ever in all of the worldwide travel that they do. That is inconceivable for them. To ask for an honorarium? To ask to be recompensed in some way? Yes, if they're invited somewhere, they'll let someone arrange travel for them and accommodations. But that's just being a guest with someone, that's nothing wrong with that. And oftentimes it's that they themselves that take care of their own travel and accommodations. However, to ask for an honorarium, that is foreign. And I know the context in which we live. There are some people who accept honorariums to take care of their worldly needs so they can focus on their work. And that is fine as long as the heart is not attached to them. And that is fine as long as that's not the only criterion for what it is that they do. And that is fine as long as they don't incline towards that wealth that they see. They see it as something dirty that they needed to take care of their worldly needs so they could focus on the work. That's really what it's all about. And our teachers are adamant about this. We remove all worldly desire from the work that we're doing for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. If you want to earn money, there's nothing wrong with earning money, but don't do it through the deen. Earn money by having a job, by getting involved in some type of business, that project or idea. But do not make it through the deen. And no matter what people are doing in your particular time, is that these are the principles of the munawwareen, the people who are enlightened, and the muqarrabeen, and who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he then says, this stage has two distinct aspects. One, to inspire the recipient of the call with due concern for the call unto God, and two, to nurture his natural abilities so that they are used within the sphere of calling unto God, and to likewise redirect his mental and physical capacities towards the service of the religion. And so the first step is that the person who has that deep concern, is that deep concern be transferred from his heart to the one that that established that connection with. And then secondly, is that what's called tanmiyat qudrati lil amal, is that he helps develop the abilities of that person to do the work that it is that they need to do. And people are different. Sometimes people can study well, but they're not very personable. Or sometimes people are personable, but they're not good students. Sometimes people are athletic, but they're not this. Or they're this, but they're not that, and so forth and so on. And that we should strive to have an array of different abilities, to be able to interact with an array of different people, and to have an array of different conversations. And the more abilities that we have, the more effective that we will be, inshallah ta'ala. It's the teacher's job to help the students develop that. All with the intention of what? Serving the deen. As for the miftah, the key to this stage is to root the exaltation of the religion in his heart, and to make him feel the responsibility that has been thrust upon his shoulders. As we have already mentioned, the variant responsibilities of each type of person, the manner in which he can successfully remove the erroneous beliefs from the recipient, which ultimately prevent him from the call unto God. So, غَرْسُ عَظَمَةِ الدِّينِ فِي قَلْبِهِ. And this is something when we spent time with our teachers and the environments in which we studied, is that it was a regular occurrence, day in, day out, is that our teachers were planting these meanings into our heart. And there was times where you felt such a sense of responsibility is that you almost wanted to just go home and start working. But you have to be patient, because you have to preserve that desire to serve, but you also need to learn what it is that you need to do to go back to serve. And so different people have different circumstances, and the key is that you have that someone to supervise that your individual pursuit, to help you do what's best for you at each given moment. So what about the wasa'il? What are some of the mechanisms of this way, of this stage? Is that the oft recitation of Quranic verses and prophetic traditions that encourage calling unto God, some of which we've already made mention of in the prologue and in the opening chapter, but taking them seriously, thinking about their import, and hopefully having the meanings penetrate our heart and inspire us to live a life like this. That B, to make mention of the state of the prophetic community and the backwardness that it currently finds itself in, as well as the fact that they are being devoured by various nations, especially those that it resides within. In other words, is that understanding the hal, the state of the ummah. And this is, or at least should be, one of the etiquettes of watching news, is that we should have at least a fraction of the amount of time that we spend in dua for the amount of news that we watch or hear. But how many people are even making dua for the ummah when we hear about all these horrible things that are happening? What he's saying here is that it's good to talk about the state of the ummah and what the ummah needs, and that everything that it has fallen into, but not for the sake of doing it and just complaining, so that we can then know what needs to be done and we can be inspired to serve. But what usually happens with people is that they speak about it, or we speak about it in a way that almost leads us to despair. There's nothing that we can do. And that the upshot of those conversations is, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on myself and not do anything. That is wrong. We should speak about it in a way that there's a critique, there's a dealing with reality, but there's a motivation as well to work. And then we should also make mention of the various states of the callers and the immense struggle that they undergo, and that which they have been subjected to because of their struggle, especially those who the recipient knows or had some connection with prior to his death. Allahu Akbar. Is that we are right about the time now, and this gathering just happened in Tarim. It's the yearly celebration for the opening of Dar al-Mustafa, which coincided with the day that Habib Muhammad bin Salim bin Hafid, the father of Habib Umar, was kidnapped and eventually martyred. And they speak about this story. And Habib Umar was a young man, and at that time they were praying in Masjid al-Mihdar. And his father came in and laid his shawl down and had to go check in at the city center, which was a weekly requirement when the communists were in control of Tarim and Hadramaut. And after that, he never saw his father again. And Habib Ali mentioned the reason behind that they were doing the ta'rif of Arafah, which is where that they were going to a particular place in one of the neighborhoods in Tarim and Khayla, and they were resembling those who were standing on the plain of Arafah, where they get together, that they do dhikr and they have a few speeches. And that there were army that of the Communist Party there at the gathering. And one of the Habayib told Habib Muhammad bin Salim, don't say anything. It's too dangerous. But Habib Muhammad bin Salim refused. And he stood up and he spoke openly. And he spoke against the regime and mentioned in detail their errors and the problems with many of their beliefs. And they knew that something was going to happen to him as a result. And so he kept giving da'wah despite that, and shortly after that he was kidnapped. And when they came to him, they said, the Habib, they said, they are going to kill you if you keep doing this. That he said to them, marhaban bish-shahada, I welcome martyrdom. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And they thought by kidnapping him, they thought by whatever they did to him, that eventually that he was martyred, that somehow that they're going to stop the light. That Habib Umar was very young at that time. And one of the things that Habib Ali mentioned was about Habib Mashur. He was in another place of Hadramaut in the city of Jubail, that his father had put him in charge of a few schools when the news reached him that his father was kidnapped. And he didn't go right away because his father put him in charge of these schools. And he stayed to make sure that they were functioning, that everything was taken care of, and then after that he went. His father put the responsibility on his shoulder. No, I'm not leaving my post until I make sure things are functioning properly. Then I will leave my post. And then he eventually came back, and that he looked for his father that far and wide and couldn't find him. And he kept teaching secretly in Hadramaut. And many of the teachers now today that learned directly from him, secretly, they would sneak their books in and learn from him. And Habib Mashur was from the most firm of those. And Habib Omar, growing up, was giving da'wah from a very young age. But the situation was such that people were even scared to send salams to the sons of Habib Muhammad bin Salam, because they didn't want to be affiliated, because they knew what happened to Habib Muhammad. And then it reached a certain point where it appears that they were going to harm Habib Omar in some way, so Habib Mashur that made him leave. And he eventually ended up in Bayda, which is the city of one of his great teachers, Habib Muhammad bin Abdullah al-Haddar, who was a close friend of Habib Muhammad bin Salam, who studied with him in the Ribat Tarim, and eventually went back to teach and give da'wah there. And that Habib Omar ended up marrying his daughter. And I remember one of the times when Jalsat al-Ithnain, which is the tafsir, weekly tafsir class on Monday nights, it was held in the place where the scholars used to have to go check in. And Habib Omar mentioned one time that he remembers that time, that how dark it was, and all of the restrictions, and how many of the religious functions stopped. But then look, short time passes. You think that you're extinguishing the light of Allah. But now look what happens. It came back with full force. Many times greater than it was before. And you think that you're going to stop it? And all you've done is been a means for the martyrdom of someone, and to attain the highest degrees of closeness to Allah Ta'ala, and then for Allah Ta'ala to place something special in the heart of His Son, to take this da'wah not just to Hadramaut, that not just to places in Yemen, worldwide. Worldwide. You think you're going to extinguish the light of Allah? Allah is going to complete His light. He is going to complete His light, whether people realize it or not, whether they try to stop it or not. The best thing is to join the side of truth and help the teaching spread. Because otherwise, that it's going to happen regardless. And you don't want to go down in history as someone who's trying to block the light of the Prophet ﷺ. And if you're from within the ranks of Islam, is that you don't want to be replaced. You're going to regret that. All of us are going to regret that. We were going to regret the moments that we spent in this world for doing things that are not going to directly lead to the realities of the spreading of the teachings and light of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we see that the great ranks that these people have, and if we can see through it in this dunya, the way people look at them, how they're, that people that view them, and we can see the importance of this work and retain firmness upon the path. Inshallah ta'ala, there'll be great good in store for us, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But wrapping this up fairly quickly, that also to make mention of its greatness, that is, that the importance of da'wah, and that how it is the supreme concern of the prophets and messengers, and that the good state of the community rests upon it, with the root cause of their afflictions and superiority of the enemy over them being due to their abandonment of it. Also, to nurture his natural abilities. To nurture his natural abilities, so that they are used within the sphere of calling unto God, and to likewise redirect his mental and physical capacities. Okay? And so that this first part, okay, is that how to that bring about a deep concern in the heart of the one calling. Okay? And the second part is the various ways in which that we can help people grow. As for his mental capacity, then that is for it to be applied to discovering the most appropriate ways to rescue humanity. And as for his physical capacity, it implies that he directs it toward the path of servitude for the call unto God. So that we should be thinking in this way. The key to this stage is to infuse his heart with trust in his own ability to benefit the prophetic community. In other words, is that you have to give people the skills and the expertise that they need, that they know now that they have the confidence, and really their confidence is based upon their trust in Allah, that they can benefit people and help others. As for the various mechanisms, to incite him to persist with others. In other words, to spend time with people and to work on people and to develop relationships with people and to help people. Also, to incite him to contemplate that which will benefit the prophetic community even for a day. In other words, is that we should have a regular wird, a regular litany of thinking of various ways that we can be in the service of others. And then to assist him in the realization of his ideas, which were the outcome of his contemplation. So he thought about ideas, and that maybe he wants to do A, B, or C. How can he actually do that? Helping people develop a plan to carry out those ideas. 4, to encourage him to visit others regularly, albeit that it initially is in the company of another caller. And so it's good that when we're young and we're still learning, to that go out with people and to see the way that they do things, to spend time with your teachers, to understand that the various methods that they use in various situations. This helps us learn. And if someone has an ability to travel with one of the teachers, it is one of the great things that we can do, and there is immense benefit in that. And you learn by their interactions. And then, but to visit others regularly is important. But what is our intention behind it? It should be everything in relation to everything that's already mentioned. To incite him to remind and admonish in private gatherings, even if it only constitutes reciting a solitary prophetic tradition. So getting that person used to that giving speeches and saying things of benefit, right? Or on a one-on-one basis, that having conversations with people that be of benefit as well. And then finally, to clarify to him that the call is not limited to just sermons and admonitions, is that is one of the most important aspects of the call, but there are many other ways to give da'wah. There are many other ways to be of service, and we should find which one is most facilitated for ourselves and stick to it. As for the basic principle of this stage, it is to take into careful consideration the abilities of people. God, exalted be He, says, God does not compel a soul to do what is beyond its ability. So helping people that maximize their potential, which relates to their understanding of their God-given abilities and using it in a religious framework to better themselves and also to benefit other people. May Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq in this affair, open up the doors of service for us. May we live and die upon that. Blessed be people of deep sacrifice, and may that all be accepted by Allah, and may be a means for us to attain the highest degrees of closeness to Him. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadan wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.